I'd like to address first the question of what is the point of the 21 points. Okay, for us, for Ian and I, the 21 points constitute an opportunity for the staff and students of any school to transcend the current status quo. We built on our work in Nudge for Schools, and we focused sharply on developing a toolkit, or an armoury if you like, which will enable the principal and the staff to take control, and the word control is important for us, and set about the process of achieving a school that flourishes. And again, we want to emphasise the word flourish. We've grouped the toolkit around the mnemonics 7-7-7, or the 7 M's. That is 7 E's, 7 M's and 7 S's. The 7 E's set the stage for what we want to achieve. They give us an overall directionality or map of where we actually want to go. We want to achieve what the philosopher Roy Bassett called eudaimonia. That is, a school that flourishes, where people thrive. Now the path that takes us there lies through self-esteem, mutual esteem, existential security, ergonomic efficiency, empowerment, and universal emancipation. Now, by contrast with that, the 7 M's and the 7 S's are the tools that you will draw upon as you proceed along the path to flourishing, to the eudaimonistic school. Now, a number of final questions before you set out. Why should you undertake the journey? Why attempt to disrupt the status quo? What's so bad about surviving? Now, the answer to these questions is because you care. You are professionals. You have a set of values and you want to achieve better results. Thank you. The crucial distinction we operate with first is that between fast thinking and slow thinking. That distinction, of course, has been made by Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, in his book on fast and slow thinking. Okay, now what is fast thinking? Fast thinking is, well, as the name suggests, fast, speed. Other people call it intuition. Now, if we want an example of that, let's take a look at body language. Now, if we look at this photograph of Obama, okay, Barack Obama, we look at it and immediately we can process it. We understand he's not in a good mood. We understand he's angry. We see somebody like that, we have signals saying, be careful here. This man is in a bad mood. This man is potentially dangerous. Now that kind of fast thinking, that kind of intuition is really part of the human species. We develop it because we need it. It's very important to work out how people are feeling, what they say, so we can actually respond to that. We need to know when people are angry. We need to know when people are happy. And we do that, and we do it immediately, we do it quickly. That's fast thinking. Now, as I say, fast thinking, it's not inferior thinking, but it's different. Now, the alternative thinking we call slow thinking. That's basically the work of logic, the work of inference, the processes we go through, the mental processes we go through when we're trying to work a problem out. Very different from fast thinking. Now, if we take a look at Pascal's triangle, okay, now we look at that triangle. Now, the task is, say, to work out what the next line is in that triangle. Okay, first, now that process involves slow thinking, slow logic. We have to work out what the pattern is, and then we have to see it. We have to guess it, the pattern, and then try it out. So those processes take time. That's slow thinking. Now, schools dwell in slow thinking, but slow thinking is always embedded within a huge network of fast thinking. Now, what we need to do is work out how fast thinking operates and how slow thinking operates. What we're primarily about, we're not neglecting slow thinking, but let's take a look at the process of fast thinking first. Okay, now what we believe is most important is this. If you're coming up against a problem, If you're having a difficulty with a student, difficulty with a member of staff, difficulties with the principal, the head of department, whatever, if you're encountering difficulty, what you're almost certainly doing is you're bumping up against someone else's fast thinking. So you need to know how fast thinking works. We call this the need to colonize the space of fast thinking. What we think is this, that the principal and the staff of a particular school should have a policy, a strategy, a determination that they will colonize the fast thinking around the school. Now we've come up, Ian Mackey and myself have come up with what we call a curriculum for fast thinking, a procedure, okay? And we've devised this thing called the 7-7-7 strategy. And we'll talk you through basically through the 7-7 strategy, and then we'll concentrate on each strategy. We believe that that's a curriculum for fast thinking. And if the school implements that, goes through the curriculum, well then the task of persuasion will be largely accomplished. That's our promise. We'll show you how people think, and we'll show you how you can persuade. Symbols, signs, and systems. We'll talk a little bit about each one of those. Now, what are sayings? By sayings, we mean just like proverbs. These are short, pithy statements that contain wisdom. Stitch in time saves 9. A watch kettle never boils. Those are the kind of sayings and proverbs from my own childhood. They distill the wisdom of the people. Okay, and proverbs sayings have enormous effect. They're fast thinking in action. They sort of guide people and they construct how people will think. Now, take a saying like recent case in Baltimore, the Baltimore riots, the case of Freddie Gray, the Afro-American who died in police custody. He was handcuffed, put into a police paddy wagon, and whatever happened, he ended up with a broken neck and dead. The African-American community rioted. Now, the Attorney General, Marlon Mosby, herself an Afro-American, held a press conference. At that press conference, she declared her intention to charge the 7 police officers with homicide. She was going to arrest them and charge them. Now, that was an enormously controversial decision. In the context of American social society, in the context of American politics, that was an incredibly brave thing to do. She was immediately attacked in the media, in the Fox media. She was ridiculed, and she became a kind of an object of hate. But for the Afro-Americans, she became an object of admiration. Now, it's very interesting to watch her press conference. Now, if you just look at this little excerpt from her press conference, she comes down the stairs, she stands in front of the microphones, and she addresses the people. Now, she knows she's in the middle of Mr. Controversy. She knows she's in the middle of anger, hatred, and fear. Now, what does she do? She reaches for a saying. She says, "No one is above the law." With that saying, that saying, she actually constructs the whole debate. You can't disagree with her because, of course, no one's above the law. And so she actually ensures her position is strengthened. So what we need to do now in Indigenous education and the operational school, we need to have a repertoire of sayings. We need to have something we say repeatedly, which will structure how people think. In other words, that's an example of how we will colonize fast thinking. What are the sayings in the school? Sayings, of course, I would say, but I was told when I was a kid, an education is easily carried. That's a saying. An education is easily carried. Or another saying which is very influential in America at the moment, an African proverb, an African saying, it takes a whole village to raise a child. What is the meaning of that? The children that come to school are the responsibility of the full community. If a child is not going to school, well, that child is the concern of everyone. The concern of the shop, the shopkeeper, the concern of the people who pass the child by. You should be in school. Time to get to school. This is a school day, isn't it? So everybody takes responsibility, because it takes a full village, a whole village, to raise a child. That's something we colonize, something we use. And through that saying, we will actually colonize the fast thinking. We will shape, we'll construct fast thinking to work for us, to work for the child, and of course, to work for the community. The question of slogans. Now, slogans, again, are short, pithy sayings. They differ from proverbs, or in the sense that they, sayings are proverbs. They differ in the sense that they do not necessarily contain wisdom. They're best thought of as calls for action. They have what's called a strong axiological element. We're supposed to act on. Slogans call upon us to act. Again, they structure the fast thinking. Now, in this space, some very, very famous slogans. The suffragette slogan of "Votes for Women." Now, of course, we live in a time when women have the vote, and women vote, so we have forgotten all about the heroic struggle to get the vote. The struggle in which women fought, went to prison, went on hunger strike, were beaten up and abused, ridiculed. They went through a whole gamut of opposition to get the vote. Now that struggle was captured in the slogan, "Votes for Women." So slogans unite people and direct them towards a particular form of action. So we in the school should think of what slogan will we come up with will actually get the school to unite and show them what to do, what actions to take to build in the axiological component, a direction for action. Now, Chris Sarah, in his book, in his great book about the Strong and Smart, Towards a Pedagogy for Emancipation, a book which all teachers of Indigenous people should read, in my opinion, he talks about the slogans he came up with. The slogans, young, black and deadly. And the slogan itself, strong and smart. Strong and smart? Strong in a sense meant people had a strength, a pride in their culture, that they felt strong about who they were. They felt positive about being Aboriginal. They rejected all the negative stereotyping, all the abusive baggage which put around the notion of being Indigenous in Australia. So they were going to be strong. They were going to struggle and fight for their rights. They were going to fight for their dignity, fight for their identity. And strong captured that. Smart, an awareness that they need to be able to operate at a level where they could compete with any section of Australian society. That they would not be at the bottom, they would capture the high ground in terms of literacy, in terms of being able to write, speak and read, that they would be at the forefront. So strong and smart for him was a slogan. And the children, I've seen them, they used to chant it, strong and smart. And young, black and deadly. That they were young, that they were black, they were Aboriginal, and they were deadly. In their own dialect, that meant they were very smart, very sharp. In a sense, we can see the slogan built their self-esteem and also told them what to do. They had an action, they had to become strong and they had to become smart. So slogans like that work. If we go to the commercial world, we see how slogans operate there. Slogans like Coca-Cola slogan, thirst come, thirst served. Very sharp, very quick, very witty. Tells you what to do, get a Coca-Cola and drink it. The next test we'll deal with is a question of songs. We put this element in because we're heavily influenced by, again, the work of Dr. Chris Sarah and his use of the school song. Let me read to you just from his book. Let me read to you what he wrote. A school song was developed to create pride and unity in our school, and most importantly, to give us all a time together in which we all felt great. All of the children know the song well and sing it with great enthusiasm. The lyrics to our school song are, jingle bells, Cherbourg School is here. We're young and black and deadly, so come and hear us cheer. Hey! Bring on every challenge and put us to the test. We're from Cherbourg State School and we know we're the best. Hey! Now, I've actually seen the children of Cherbourg singing that song, and I've actually seen them rocking with joy and excitement, and it's been wonderful. And Chris Sarah's quite true about it all. It helped build a we, build an us, and made the we and the us, the school community, all feel good. Now, in a sense, once more, it colonised the fast thinking. It shaped the fast thinking. Now, songs do that. Songs take us out of the world we're in and move us often to a better place. They're the voice of our better angels, and they actually make us feel different. Like in my own time, during the anti-Vietnam War protests, the song that captured the mood of the protest, expressed how the people were feeling and gave strength to that feeling was, all we are saying is give peace a chance. So the spectacle of thousands and thousands of people singing that song all around the world, united in opposition to the war, was a very moving spectacle, but more importantly, was a very important spectacle. Now, there's something of that is captured in the school song. So what we're saying is, every school should have a song, and the kids should sing it, and sing it often and sing it regularly. It should structure their feeling, it should colonise their fast thinking about the school, and it should take them, as all music does, as all songs do, to a better place. Opens up a different world to them. Music and songs are very powerful means of shaping people's thinking, shaping people's feelings, and making them better, making them stronger, and in Cherbourg's thing, stronger and smarter. Thank you. The S we're dealing with is stories. Now, we feel this is very important because every culture has its stories. All people tell stories. But what do stories do? Again, they structure and shape the fast thinking of the people, of the group, the community, the individuals who tell the story. Okay, so we feel that every school and every teacher should have a set of stories. Once upon a time, there were class readers, and the class readers had a set of stories. These stories were meant to inspire people, to make them do things. Like my own reader, we had the story of Grace Darling, the lightkeeper's daughter, the girl in the Victorian times, the girl who took a boat and drove and rowed the boat out and rescued people. She was a kind of heroic person that saved lives, and she was a model to follow. All the school readers had stories of Florence Nightingale, the heroic woman who went to the Crimea and began the modern hospital system. So these stories inspired generation upon generation of people. Now, of course, what stories are operating in your culture and your community and your school? Now, we feel that the staff, the principal, the school should actually take that question quite seriously and deliberately set about using stories to colonise the fast thinking of the community, the fast thinking of the parents, and the fast thinking of the children. Now, I'd like you to read to you one particular story. It's from Chris Sarah's autobiography, Good Morning, Mr. Sarah. And that whole autobiography is a rich source of stories. Stories about an Indigenous professional, how he set about becoming the principal of Cherbourg School. My own story about that is that Chris rang me before he was going to school and asked me for advice. Should he go? I said, no, don't. You've got a good professional career as a lecturer, you know. You're risking all that by going to school, which is a very difficult school, and I must say, I said it was a basket case of a school, and it truly wasn't functioning very well. Chris ignored my advice, and the rest is history. But this is how the process his first day at Cherbourg. I drove up to Cherbourg on the morning of our meeting, and we sat in Gail's office, that's the former principal. I was feeling reasonably confident with the challenges ahead of me, and the three-way conversation was going well. At about 5 minutes past 10, a gorgeous little black face appeared in the doorway. "Here, Miss Gale, what you doing?" It was Paddy Alberts from the grade 5 classroom down the hallway, through the staff room and along the veranda. "Good morning, Paddy," Miss Gale said politely. "One of these men is going to be the new principal of the school. Can you guess which one?" Paddy sized us up before shooting his jet black arm in Lee's direction and shouting, "Him!" All I could think was, what? You don't think a black fella could be a school principal? I guess he probably didn't. Why would he? He had never seen one in that role. Miss Gale smiled. Lee and I smiled with her. I couldn't help looking at the clock and wondering why this child wasn't in class, as it was prime learning time. "Well, Mr. Lee will be here for 3 weeks, and then Mr. Sarah," I interjected. "Mr. Sarah will be the new principal after that. He is taking over from me." I'm not sure whether he had a look of surprise on his face, or whether it was just that natural sense of exuberance, enthusiasm and effervescence that you see on the faces of so many young children. He strode into the office at Miss Gale's invitation to shake hands blackfellas way. Moments later he disappeared down the long dark corridor towards his class, and we got back into our discussion about the annual operation plan. A few minutes later that same little black face reappeared in the doorway, only this time with 4 other little black faces that should really have been staring at the teacher rather than at me. "Here, that's our new principal. There, he's black too," I heard Paddy telling them. They all mooched up to the door and were welcomed in by Miss Gale. We did the handshakes and all, and moments later they disappeared again, down the hallway, through the staff room and along the veranda to their classroom. We made small talk about how nice it was that they would come down to say hi to us. And then the same black face reappeared again, only this time with another 8 black faces. They all wanted to say hello and check out the new principal. "There's him there, la," he was saying. Feeling very pleased with themselves, they all came to shake their hands and say good-day. As I did this special handshake with each one of them, I was thinking, you boys better enjoy this freedom of running around during class time, because as soon as I get here, it will all be over. Now, that story for me captures several levels of experience. It enables me to understand the process of how an Indigenous man would go into a place, actually the very first Indigenous principal of Cherbourg, how he would become a professional, and how he set about the task of organising a better learning environment for the children. Also, built into that, the reaction of the kids, which is so beautifully captured, built into that is the notion that this was a space which is dominated by low expectations. The children did not expect a black man, an Indigenous man, ever to become school principal. Cleaners maybe, gardeners, groundsmen, yes, but principals, no. That was not an expectation they had. And Chris Sarah, of course, his professional life has actually been devoted to raising the expectations of the people, showing them, yes, they can become professional. Yes, they can be Indigenous. Yes, they can be professional. So the story captures that tension between the low expectations that have been drilled into the kids and the high expectations that Chris Sarah wanted to bring there, and which he succeeded in bringing to the school. So we get a drama, we get humour. Then, of course, there's also a question of the culture of the school. Kids came and went, ran free during class time. That was a no-no for Chris. His expectations of them, they'd be in the classroom and they would be learning. There wouldn't be the kind of anarchy which was tolerated by previous principals. This would be a school where children were there to learn. So the story captures all that. Now, in your school, in your classroom, in your community, there are stories which you should tell. Now, we suggest the stories of success. The story of a kid who actually succeeded. Story of children who actually made it, who through adversity, through the to difficulties associated with poverty. So there are stories in your community, there are stories in your classroom, there are stories everywhere. You should tell the positive stories to the children, and you should inspire them. Just as when my own school readers long years ago, I sat down, I was reading about Grace Darling, the heroic Victorian girl who rowed out from the lighthouse and rescued people who were in danger of drowning. This was the kind of story that inspired generation upon generation. What we need are stories which will inspire generation upon generation of Indigenous people to learn. All right, the next S we're dealing with is symbols. The symbol is a concrete, material thing that stands for an abstract idea. The symbol that springs most to mind in this context of Indigenous education is the symbol of the Aboriginal flag. The yellow, the black and the red. We know that the black represents the Aboriginal people, the red earth, where they come from, and the yellow, the sun, that gives everybody life. Now those material things have enormous symbolic significance, enormous meaning for Aboriginal people. What they do, of course, is call into being an Aboriginal nation. We can see the pride in their flag. That's what flags do. They call into being a nation, a people united. Now, if we look at this photograph of Cathy Freeman, the great Aboriginal athlete, we see her with two flags, the Australian flag and the Aboriginal flag. Now what meanings are made there is this. The meaning is this, is most importantly captured by the word and. The Australian flag and the Aboriginal flag. We get a sense of unity, a sense of inclusiveness. People together. The divisions of the past are overcome, and we see a very symbolic representation of the meaning of the word reconciliation. An Aboriginal person gives back to the Australian people the gift of acceptance of the Australian flag and acceptance of our own people's flag. So what are the symbols that are around the school? What meanings do they create? Now, one school I went into, in the entrance foyer, the first thing I saw was a collection of didgeridoos, beautifully mounted, beautifully displayed. Now, what did that symbolize? These material things, what meaning did they create? Well, for me, they created a meaning that this was a school that had a significant Aboriginal component and had a significant positive feeling towards Indigenous culture and Indigenous people, and was proud to make a statement like that. The very first thing I saw were the didgeridoos. Then there was another cabinet with a collection of clapsticks. Again, beautifully made, beautifully decorated. Again, added to the meaning, creating the meaning of pride in Indigenous culture, acceptance of it, foregrounding it, making a statement that Indigenous people deeply value, deeply accept. So the symbols we have, the material things, how we use to create meanings around the school, they are most important. And we should have what's called a symbol audit. We should look at the school. What are the symbols? What are the meanings being created here? Are they the meanings we want? Are they the meanings we need? If they're not, we change the symbols. So symbols are important. Symbols create meaning, and we actually organise and create that. And once more, to repeat, we will colonise the fast thinking in this area. Thank you. The next topic is the topic of signage, what signs we use. Of course, signage is a well-known tactic in the world of advertising, in the commercial world. We drive along the road, we see signs everywhere, advertising this, advertising that. And most schools, all schools in fact, have signs of some level. But what they do not have, or generally don't have, is like a signage policy. They haven't done like an audit of what signs are at work in the school and what are the impact. Now, we think there's a couple of general rules about the signage policy. First, the school should do an audit. What are the signs? What are the messages given? And above all, we want to stress, repeatedly stress, that the signs must be positive. They must create not a you versus us. They must create a we. The signs must be positive. It's what we do together. No negatives. Like we've done a study of signs in staff rooms. If we've found signs like, wash up your dishes, we're not your mother. We oppose signs like that because they create an us versus them. And they actually do not lead to the dishes being washed. They create hostility. It's we clean up our dishes here. We make the staff room look well, because that's the kind of people who we are. So this creation of a we, this positive collective, is what should emerge from the signs. Now we have lots of policies. We have signs now at, say, Pompero State School. They have a process. The school is covered with these very professional signs. Be respectful. Be a learner. And they have nice pictures of kids everywhere, and they decorate the school. So the child comes into the school and sees a very positive, beautiful sign. Now, so that's a deliberate signage policy in the Pompero State School. We encourage other schools to do the same. Now, we also want to say that these signs are effective. There's a study which shows that we can get people to use steps instead of the escalator by putting a sign up, emphasizing steps, going up the steps, or taking steps to a healthy body. Take steps to a healthy life. Now, we're also quite interested in the old process, say, the famous Burma shave ads, where you drove along Route 66 and you'd see a series of signs, the mistake that everybody makes to rely on the brake horn instead of the brake. And these set out over 5 signs, and the last sign would have Burma shave. So you're driving along, you're reading these, and you get the message at the end, Burma shave. We'd like to see a process where along the route to the school, we have a sign that says, it's cool to be at school, and then the name of the school. And we can vary it. We can, it's fine to be on time. Think of sort of jingles, think of sort of slogans or signs, and rearrange them and vary them and put them along the route, and the kids see them as they're coming. In the heat of the summer, school is cool. These are all sort of signs that it should be fun to make, actually. And the part of the activity, the kids actually make the signs themselves and put them up. So a sign, what we're saying is this: first do an audit of the signs in your school. Are they kind of signs that are positive? Do they create a community, or do they create an us versus them? Do they polarize, or do they unite? We again emphasize unite, create the collective, create the we, create the social norm, and that the signs should do that. And of course, vary your signs, place them in different places, and think too of the community. We want to introduce the concept of the notion of a service scape. Just like we talk about the landscape, we talk about the service scape. This is the scape, the area, the space that you service, you as educators service. What's your footprint within the space? What signs have you put up within the space? What messages are you giving? And we believe you should put signs not just on the school or around the school, but signs in places in the community. Part of the service scape, that is, you are servicing and you are in charge of, you're in control of. So we want to introduce the notion of the service scape. We want to introduce the notion of a signage policy, a signage audit, a signage policy, and signs being used to get the kind of behaviour you want. Thank you. The next topic is the topic of strengths. This is possibly the most important of all the topics we'll cover. Now, we know that we're supposed to do what's called a strengths-based approach instead of a problems-based approach. We know we're supposed to concentrate on what strengths the children have, what strengths the community has, and of course what strengths the staff have. So a strengths-based approach is what we want. But the question is, how do we actually actualize? How do we go about that? How do we actualize a strengths-based approach? Now, one of the ways forward, of course, is to take what's called the VIA classification of strengths in this book by Marty Seligman. Now, the Seligman's book talks about, first, about there are the 6 virtues, and each of the virtues has some strengths. So there are a total of 6 virtues and 24 strengths. I'll just read them out to you now, okay? First we have the virtue of wisdom and knowledge. That's a virtue, wisdom and knowledge. And then we have strengths associated with that. The strengths are curiosity, love of learning, judgment, ingenuity, social intelligence, and perspective. The next virtue is courage. Courage has the strengths of valor, perseverance, integrity. The next virtue, humanity and love. And then the strengths of kindness and loving. And then we have the virtue of justice. And of course the strengths are citizenship, fairness, leadership. And then we have the virtue of temperance, with the associated strengths of self-control, prudence, and humility. The final virtue is that of transcendence, which includes the strengths of appreciation of beauty, the strength of gratitude, hope, spirituality, forgiveness, humour, and zest. Okay, now what the strengths-based approach is this. The first task is to become aware of your strengths. Your strengths. There's if you look at Seligman's book, you go on the Google VIA classification of strengths, you can actually take the test yourself and find out what are your strengths, but it's called your signature strengths, what your mainly areas you're strong in. So you recognize your strengths. Now, having recognized your own strengths, you look around you and recognize the strengths of your colleagues. You recognize the strengths in the community. You recognize the strengths in the classroom. And then you become what's called a strength spotter. You spot strengths. You don't look for weaknesses, you look for strengths. What do you do when you find them? You actually tell people when it's appropriate, when you got time, you were very strong today. You showed a lot of perseverance. I love the zest you bring into the classroom. You're really lively. Or I love your kindness. So we actually give people feedback. Now, apparently the process of giving feedback actually strengthens the strengths. We're more likely to get it. So we actually give an emphasis on the strengths, an emphasis on our own strengths and the strengths of others, and we build the strengths. Now we know some strengths need work on. So we have a little series of exercises, like say the strength of perseverance, never giving up. Some people give up too easily. Well, so we have a little exercise. I'll persevere today at this. I will definitely I'll do a bit more. And so we encourage the growth of perseverance. The question of kindness. Think of the kind acts. Every day do an act of kindness. And so we build up our kindness profile, as it were, the strength profile. So we are approaching this question of positiveness. We have strengths of character. Every community has strengths. If they did not have strengths, it would not exist as a community. Every group of children has strengths. I mean, my own observations of Aboriginal children are, the most of all, they've got zest, liveliness. Their hearts are full of hope. They're full of fun. They bounce around. They've got zest galore. So we actually use that and praise it. And just the question is directing it into the fields of learning. So a strength-based approach is a positive approach. It begins from knowing my own strengths, becoming mindful of them, and becoming mindful of the strengths of others, and developing a series of exercises. Another exercise is, for instance, to think of yourself when you're at your best. Think of a time when you're at your best. Write down what was best about you, what strengths you showed, and then realize that these are what make you a strong person. And you develop other strengths. Or you project into the future. Think of yourself as really achieving, really doing well. Think of your best possible self. Consider it carefully, meditate upon it, and aim to achieve that, to go towards it. So strengths-based approaches are positive approaches, are approaches which develop what's already there, the character in the kids, the strengths they have, and foregrounds them and shapes them and encourages them. It's the opposite, of course, is the negative approach, which we do not do. We do a strengths-based approach based on the VIA classification and based on Martin Seligman's work on flourishing.